In this video, we're going to talk about collision layering, setting the layer point attribute to indicate which layer should lay on top of another layer. Here I have a simple setup where there's just two spheres. They are identical except for one thing. Each one has a layer attribute turned on by default. This is turned off, but if you turn it on, you can indicate a layer attribute. And if you look in the geometry spreadsheet, there is a layer attribute on each one of these, a 1 and a 2. The lower number usually wins. This is what I mean by this is if you have two separate pieces of mesh or sim mesh, the lower number is usually seen as the mesh that is more dense and should win should they collide. So when these two actually collide with all the default settings, and you can see the little sizzling here, but if we go to wireframe mode, you can see that the one on the left, whose number is a 1 versus a number 2, seems to be pushing into this one a little bit more. On the solver, there's an attribute called layer shock. Layer shock is a multiplier for the mass on the points of each one of these meshes. So it'll take the lower one, multiply the lower mesh by 4 times the mass so that it looks a little bigger. I mean, so it'll win in any collisions. You could think of this as a slider, according to the documents, that as you move it farther to the right, it makes this more and more dense. So now it makes the mesh 10 times more mass, have more mass, so it definitely wins in that regard. So you can set these layer attributes using a point wrangle. You can set these attributes on the cloth nodes, but on temp meshes, etc., you can't really set them, so you have to set it using a point wrangle. Let's see what it looks like at 1. So if we rewind and just go like this, it looks like they have even mass, so they kind of meet in the middle. Let's take the mass of side 2 and let's multiply it by 10. Rewind and let's play. So now 2 should win because it has 10 times what would appear as 10 times the mass as the left side here. So if we went back to 0.1, it's the same effect as, I'm going to reverse this now. So I'm going to go to the solver and I'm going to turn layer shock to 10. So now the lower number layer will now seem 10 times more dense than the layer above it. So as I'm setting up the character, I usually go through and assign values, I believe, that are appropriate. Metal objects like the buttons and buckles, I usually put lower than the value of the thing that they're connected to. So you'll see the button's a 10 and the shirt is a 20. This would make more sense, right? Because you don't want the shirt penetrating into the button. That doesn't make sense. So I went through here and started on the very inside and started assigning by 10. Now just in case I have to swap things around or insert objects or props or whatever, I leave at least a value of 10 in between so that I can go in there and slide something if I needed to in a shot. Also, I keep track of my collision groups because sometimes navigating inside of the scene can be a pain in the butt, so you just kind of copy and paste all of your values over here into a sheet. It doesn't have to be a spreadsheet, it can be anything, but this way at least you can keep track of what it is you're colliding against and what you're not colliding against.